Hello and welcome back to IPMA Global Best Practice Week. I'm Laura Lashaita from IPMA, the moderator of Stage 1. The topic of the day is leadership. We are continuing discussing and analyzing large projects on Stage 1 today. Are you interested in an advice on how to extract more value from your infrastructure Capex projects post-crisis? I'm very excited to announce the next speaker, Mr. John Wylie from Canada, proudly representing the Proud Food Consulting Company. Hello, John. Thanks for being with us today.
Hi, Laura. Great to be here, and thanks very much for inviting me.
John leads the world-class global natural resources practice for Proud Food Consulting. He has experienced over 30 years of success in operational consulting and thought leadership in the mining, minerals, and metal sector, advising on business strategies with a future focus. He has led and delivered over 1 billion measurable business benefits globally. An expert in the natural resources sector, John has expanded the business across the globe from North America to the Asia Pacific and to South America. I can't wait to hear your insights on Capex projects, John. The stage is yours.
Thanks very much, Laura. I'll share my screen then. The opportunity that we're talking about today is around capital projects and how to deliver more value from them. It's a really interesting opportunity, I think, that we can see, especially when we put into context the fact that, for the most part, the really construction and capital projects productivity has not necessarily improved greatly. We do productivity studies, as does The Economist, as does the Project Management Institute. If you look at the productivity in terms of value added, and you look at it from 1995 to the current period of time, the general total economy has improved, or has basically doubled in terms of value added per hour or dollar spent between 1995 and 2020, or 2019, actually, the last year. That's the total economy. The construction industry generally has flatlined. It's only a 10% increase, as opposed to a 200% or 100% increase. Manufacturing actually has increased beyond that, and so they're looking at an improvement against the total economy. So there is some opportunities for improvement. Capital projects post-COVID, I think, certainly are going to be an important requirement, or certainly an important aspect of how we get back to pre-COVID economic levels. So it's going to be important, not only in terms of what we're already starting to see in terms of national economies and national governments starting to look at capital spending as a way to jumpstart the economy, but we're also seeing large companies looking at how are they going to essentially reinvent themselves. If you look at nearshoring of suppliers, and so the supply chain is changing to a certain extent. If you look at how retailers are starting to move from large bricks and mortar into online, you're starting to, and as you see office workers and knowledge workers working from home as opposed to in offices, we're going to see some significant structural changes within the typical business models. Capital projects are going to have to lead the way in terms of rebuilding warehouses, in terms of rebuilding. There's obviously a significant amount of infrastructure that's going to change, and I think so. It's really actually very important to look at how effective and how productive we can be in capital projects and in the construction industry. The other thing that we have to look at is that the complexity of capital projects and delivery of capital projects has significantly changed. So the risk management side of things, the engagement, the shareholder engagement and shareholder management is much more of a significant issue for large capital projects nowadays, especially with the localization of workforces and the localization of management. I think that pre-COVID, it was quite all right to have experts flying in. In fact, you could fly in entire workforces and especially labor people. And now with post-COVID, I don't know whether you're actually going to be able to do that. What we're already starting to see is that the isolation requirements required for COVID is actually changing significantly the schedules, the worker roster schedules, and the management. So management is having to manage large capital-intensive projects remotely, which is an entirely different and very complex issue. If we look at market history, and if we look at our previous experience with capital projects, there is a significant gap in our performance against expectations. So the PMI, Project Management Institute, on an annual basis does a annual survey, which they call Pulse of the Profession. And they call out generally what the performance is. And this is over 3,000 projects. They interview 500 odd chief executives. And this is what they're seeing. And of course, what we're already seeing in the industry as well, is that historically, 70 to 90% of capital projects exceed the original planned budget or the original planned costs. And 50 to 100% of projects overrun their budget in terms of the schedule. So on typically what we're seeing is, on average, we're over budget and we're delayed in the schedule. So that has a significant impact in terms of NPV. So typically, or the net present value, or the delivery of the business benefit that capital project was to deliver. So whether you're building a plant or a warehouse or a piece of infrastructure, that there's whether it's a port or a railroad or a terminus, there's a capital project benefit or a business benefit to that capital project being effective. Delaying those projects by even a week or a month can have significant NPV impact. So for instance, when we were putting together, the risk profile for a schedule adherence for a gold mine in Europe, in Eastern Europe. It was a relatively small gold plant, and we were looking at what the impact of a 1 week delay in the scheduled startup of that plant would be. And based on just looking at the numbers and the throughput and the benefit that the company was going to get from the gold plant, it was about a $4 million impact on a week's delay. Now, you could argue that all you're doing is you're just delaying that $4 million, but that's a cash flow issue. It also which has a significant impact on business benefits. and quite frankly, to a certain extent, reputation. So you're starting to see the impact of schedule delays and budget overruns impacting share prices and impacting company, not just the project um, um, net present value, but the company's share price. So safety, community engagement, and as well ensuring that you're delivering the projects effectively. The delivery of capital projects has become more complex. It's now requiring an awful lot more capability that cannot be delivered and satisfied simply by technology. It also has to be delivered or teamed with management capability. So we have a number of complexities that have to be managed. Whether it's the logistics supply chain, the design, the stakeholders that you're going to be aligning with, typically the person that is going to operate the plant is not necessarily represented, or operate the infrastructure is not necessarily represented during the build. They are a shareholder, as is the community, as is the national government, as is the regulator, as are the labor unions if they're involved. So there's a number of stakeholders that have to be managed. That is part of the responsibility of the project management team, to manage that stakeholder engagement. One of the things that we're talking about in terms of ensuring that we have productivity is also looking at how do we manage our people. So the people management, the COVID issues around isolation and around protecting not only our workforce but our communities. This is also a complexity that is part of managing the stakeholders. So the new COVID protocols, particularly in dealing with not only the workforce on the ground but also the supply chain. Typically, I mean, if you're building a port or a terminus, experience teaches you that the constraint point is going to be the quarry. You need the quarry material in order to build the breakwater. The breakwater is typically the constraint point for a port. So the first thing that you do when you're in a project manager and you're building a new container port is you go and you meet with your supplier of stone at the quarry, and you make sure that you also meet with your supplier for cement. These are the key guys. These are the local guys. Unfortunately, the supply chain for cranes and for structural steel and things like that has become constrained, partly because of the issues around COVID and manufacturing. And that supply chain is going to have impact around your schedule, and as well, if you have to start to expedite, around your budget. In looking at impacts, it is typical that we see schedule and cost overruns. And most project managers understand that the project is going to face budget and schedule challenges, but it's not always within their control. So how well they work within the management team, and whether it's the EPCM or whether it's the owner's team, how well that project manager works across those different fronts, as well as the engagement of senior leadership in those other companies, all have impacts on the outcomes of the technical. And typically what we see is that the schedule starts to be impacted straight away at the beginning of the project. We typically see that while EPCMs are very good on the design side and the local contractors are very good on the labor side, the gap in between the handover at the project startup is typically one of the key areas where we see project schedule delays, in that we're delayed in the mobilization to site. It's an interesting thing because it's actually getting people to site and getting their safety training done, getting their housing, and whether it's going to be local or whether they're going to be in residence and in barracks, figuring out all of that, all the deployment to site, that is typically not an area of strength for either the EPCM or the contractor. And so that's really, if as a project manager, if you're looking for areas of opportunity to ensure that you're going to protect your schedule, that's almost the first place that you want to start looking. Just interestingly, and I'll just go back very quickly, if we look at it, the Project Management Institute, the PMI, in their most recent schedule review of project status, identifies that the dollars wasted per $1 billion is about 11.5%, or $114 million, which is a significant impact on both projects and on cash flows. So one of the keys that we really find in terms of being able to achieve budgets and schedule is stakeholder engagement. The area of competence that we need to focus on is essentially in three places. One is having an engagement plan around how are we going to manage and work with different stakeholders. Two is project planning and scheduling, and the detail level of project planning and scheduling. Now, understand that we have to assign work. We have to assign work in controllable, in work lots that are measurable, so that we can see whether or not there is being an impact, and so that we can take action early. The understanding that as we start to put together our design, part of the engagement of stakeholders starts with alignment around the outcomes, and then agreeing and understanding the construction assumptions of what we are agreeing to in terms of the execution. The opportunity to effectively manage risks and costs and revenue most effectively is done during the design stage. That's where we can actually address issues or complexity fairly cheaply, as opposed to it being on the ground or actually in construction. So project planning, detailed level, including stakeholder engagement, including meetings with stakeholders and actual engagement with them, so that we understand both the risks, which are part of the construction assumptions, and as well, how are we going to work together. That optimized construction schedule really is going to become an output of the stakeholder engagement. We typically start off a stakeholder engagement with a discussion around what must be achieved and what must be avoided. We want to both understand what we have to achieve, as well as understand what we have to avoid from each of the different perspectives of the stakeholders, meaning the local community, as well as the labor unions, as well as the regulators and things like that. Having a much better idea of what must be achieved from their point of view, as well as what must be avoided, allows you to build your design in a fairly robust manner. So alignment is a critical success factor. And we talk about the core team within your design group, and that may be the owner's team that's talking about what do I need this capital project infrastructure investment to achieve. Then talking about operations around how we're going to manage this. This is very much, to a certain extent, the looking at from an oil and gas or a natural resources perspective. So we have geotech or technical services included here, as well as the project steering committee that is going to not only look at the finance side, but as well as going to look at the activity side, and then the actual construction engineering and construction, and then the contractors where, so each of those people, and you want to look at across each of those different horizons from a point of view of what are the priorities, what must be achieved, and what must be avoided. Clear goals for all of the stakeholders with actual budgets and your spending schedule. When we talk about agile project planning, the agility is really, especially in a highly repetitive type of project, is to start where you're going through the same group of activities over and over and over again. What you really want to do is you want to really spend some time and develop a detailed model around how are you going to not only start, manage, finish, and transist that process. And you want to do that in isolation of all of the other things that can be occurring. And you really want to look at it from almost a perfect day type of thing and looking at all of the components. Now, understand that there is an awful lot of complexity here in that while you're trying to create an isolated environment, in lots of cases, you're going to be dealing with a shared time and space, shared resources, time and space, as well as equipment and personnel. So really, your design program in that design segment and using it as a building block is going to really serve you well. This is what a perfect day looks like. This is how we're going to, and start it right from, this is how we're going to start the shift. This is where we're going to meet. This is how we're going to get to site. This is what we're going to be doing at site for this period of time. This is how we're going to deal with the crew. This is how we're going to line them up. This is how we're going to assess them. This is how we're going to deal with the partners. This is how, figure it out. And really, when you're doing it, the idea that we are asking people to hold in their head is think about it as choreography, as opposed to just simple planning. You have to have the choreography down so that you know what you're going to be doing for each drum beat, and get it so that it's that precise. And when it is that precise, then you have much better control over it, and you can avoid the schedule overruns and the cost delays. It is less of you're actually managing the complexity by simplifying it. Managing the parts to manage the whole. Here are some of the parts. So we've talked a lot about alignment and integration. We've just talked about ensuring that you have stable processes. Decision support, we talked earlier about ensuring that you have alignment and that you have understanding across the different stakeholders, and that you have key people and they are understanding and aligned with you. Active management talks about managing from the front line. There's nothing more important than focusing on the point of execution. Ensuring that you are doing the planning and that your senior management is involved in the plan is fantastic. But the implementation, we have to be getting the feedback. We have to be looking at what activities and what outcomes have we achieved against our plans. And then managing constraints. We talked about where we can expect constraints. I've given you a couple of examples. We can expect constraints at the beginning as we mobilize. We can expect constraints for the delivery of our long-term expensive infrastructure support areas. So for instance, overhead cranes and things like that. And as well, understand that one of the reasons why we have not, the construction industry has not done well, is that we have not worked on developing the skills of our management team and our employees. So our organizational engagement, training and developing supervisors and managers to actually, in terms of engaging with people and giving them the skills to engage with people, that is a hidden opportunity and allows acceleration by creating engagement. And engagement talks about getting people involved and helping them to not only understand what you're trying to do, but actually support it. So there's a number of different studies that go out there. One of them is that, if you're talking to 10 people, 6 of them are actually not engaged with you at all. They're not even listening. Of the other 4, 2 are actively trying to figure out why you are wrong, and potentially they are not only disengaged, but they're actually thinking about how to create a different outcome. And 2 people are actually involved with you. So you want to swing the majority of people that you're talking to so that they are actively supporting you and engaged. And the way that you do that is by engaging with them and talking about how the outcomes for your project and for this team aligns with them and their personal outcomes. So one of the things that we've talked about is engagement and the importance of managing to achieve outcomes. So we're really trying to, it's important to manage activities and processes. We really want to lead people to achieve outcomes. And outcomes are so activities create outcomes. And we can apply resources in our planning stages to activities, but as well, we have to use our management skills to create the outcomes by engaging people. And so what you want to do is you want to have a project management office that's really a results hub, that's talking about the results that we're achieving. So, and typically within a project management office, we're just looking at activity. And here you can see from this results hub layout that we're actually looking at the roadmap and the vision. Where are we going? Why are we doing this? What's important to our stakeholders? And we have a communication plan. We have a results team. We're looking at measurement as an important thing. And we're also looking at constraints. We're looking at the detailed plan and schedule and the infrastructure that is required to deliver the project. And as well, we're looking at capability development within our people. And so that's part of what leadership does. Leadership helps to, it is actually a bigger job, isn't it? Helps to create capacity within their people, thereby creating a relationship with those people, but also by increasing capability within the team. So Proudfoot has a lean forward methodology that we look at. And it is not only the management operating system or the processes that you're going to use to manage and control the activities, but it's also looking at a behavioral model, a management behavioral model for a capital project. So it's how are you going to manage all of the complexities, and what are some of the capabilities that you have to apply and bring to it as a manager? Here are some of the issues that we see when we're looking at waste and issues around safety. So safety sometimes is around how we plan, but then also a lot of it is also how we measure and how we role model, and to a certain extent our culture. There's also issues around what our expectations are and how we set expectations and deliver expectations. And setting expectations and delivering expectations around communication is all around talking about what the perfect day is. And so, what are all of the different elements that we have to satisfy as part of our delivering a perfect day in order to deliver our management outcomes that we're looking for? So, we have a perfect day that we use for the managers, for control rooms, for operators. And here you can see where we're actually in the bottom end, where we're actually working with people face to face in the control rooms or in the results hubs, and talking about how we're measuring and managing. So when we look at a capital project and capital project delivery, while the plan and design is important, the people are the center. And in creating an engaged and enabled workforce is truly the key point in terms of achieving budget and schedule. The productivity issues, the complexity issues, the clarity and managing the complexity of shared time and resources, you want to actually get everybody on the same page so that they all understand what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve and how are we working together. We have a program which we call Heads Up. And Heads Up is really focused on a frontline manager, and it's really meant to be, heads up and in the game. Obviously, part of Heads Up is safety is first. We call it safe operations. And then we have the Heads Up High Five and active management behaviors. So there's 8 active management behaviors. Active management includes how you assign and follow up on work, how you give positive and negative feedback. That's all active management. Active management means that you're focused on the management of the resources and the people as opposed to the administration of the management of the people and the processes. And then we have a 1-5-30. And 1-5-30 is about giving feedback and engaging people. So let's talk about that in a little bit of detail. Safety, obviously comes first. We call it safe operations. We're talking about, and you can read this a lot faster than I can say it. One of the things about a heads up manager that we're asking people to be is to be present and lead. So being present means, being there, being in the front line, but as well demonstrating that you're present. So the active management behavior actually requires you to have your front line engage with employees at the transition point between activities. So as activities start and as they transition into the next phase. So you want to be there at the start of work. You want to be there through the work process to ensure that it's occurring okay, and that at the end where you're transitioning to the next phase. And being able to coach people and talk about, what is productive and what is not productive, and typically what are the consequences of, when we talk about positive and negative feedback, you always want to be giving people positive feedback and recognizing good effort. And negative feedback, you're not doing it in a negative way. What you're doing is you're telling people, no, this is not the outcome that we want to achieve here because of these things. Here are the consequences of that action. So the 8 active management behaviors talk about, number 1, promoting health and safety, agreeing the what we are trying to do, what are we doing, supporting the how we do it, checking in as the supervisor as opposed to checking up on people, agreeing the progress of where we are against plan. This is what you do when you're out on your site tours. Giving and receiving coaching and support, problem solving. Typically, you want people to solve the problems, and then you want to give them feedback on on how well they've done, evaluating the information and talking about what was done well and what we need to do to improve. And you're doing this consistently within the cycle. So you can really understand that if you have this type of active management, you are going to actually improve safety and improve productivity. The 1-5-30 connection culture, heads up calls from managers and supervisors to check in regularly. So that's part of the present and felt leadership model that we were talking about. It's important that you're checking in once a day. Not only do you want to make sure that that person is ready and able and to work, they're not fatigued, they haven't, they're not under the influence, they're not, they've had enough sleep, they're not concerned about, what one of their kids have been doing on social media. They're present and involved in the work program. You want to do that not only for safety reasons and productivity reasons, but also because this person is on your team. And frankly, if they're not ready and able to work, then we probably need to either find a different job for them or a different position. So we check in once a day. And we review the current status of where we are, the work that went on the shift before, what work we have to do today. And we discuss and resolve potential issues ahead of the issue. So if we have a delay in this area, this is what we're going to do instead. And then weekly, we have a conversation between a manager and supervisor to the employee. And in that weekly conversation, we're talking about how well we did, how well is that person doing, and how effective are they being, and how productive are they being. We're giving them some feedback. Now, it's important to understand that the number of studies that have been done indicate that people want feedback. They want to have that discussion. Now, typically, in the professional services groups, engineers, etc., we've always declined to have that one-to-one weekly conversation. We think that we're not getting as much benefit out of it, and it's a task. But in reality, this is one of the most important things that we can do. That weekly one-to-one discussion with a subordinate is important. And we have to do it in order to not only remain engaged and clear the air, but make sure that everybody's being present and healthy. So don't push it out, and definitely insist on having it. And don't assume that because that person's a professional that they already know what's going on, and you don't have to talk to them. Take the time and show the interest and be involved. That's the weekly conversation. And of course, I would assume that healthy practices, healthy HR practices, require all of us to have a monthly discussion with our employees and give them some feedback around how they're doing. That improves engagement. It actually increases engagement. And that conversation is really important in terms of letting people know how well they're doing and allowing them to give you some feedback as well. So I know we probably spent a little bit more time than we had to on that, but we think that it's important. And by the way, our results in working with clients demonstrate that it is important. So in conclusions, it's important to have a great plan and understand how you're going to manage your constraints. It is important to have a robust project management system. It is important to have good stakeholder engagement and a stakeholder engagement plan. So in conclusion, all of that rests on people. And interestingly, the industry has been focusing more on technology lately than people. Technology is great. It's a great communicator. But the people that are going to take that communication, that information, that data, and turn it into decisions. And decisions are what powers the capital projects. Hopefully, we've all you've enjoyed that. I think that my time is coming to an end. I'm happy to take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you. We enjoyed this great presentation on capital projects, especially the sentence, managing the complexity just by simplifying it. So, as a takeaway, in capital projects, any project delay means significant impact on cash flow. And COVID-19 definitely choked the supply chains worldwide. Just John, earlier this day, we had an interesting presentation about light rail transit project in Jakarta, Indonesia. The national strategic project, the railways for the commuters in Jakarta, it has been delayed, hugely delayed due to the pandemic, because the China closed their seaports and supply chain was cut. And I really enjoyed about your that you support stakeholders engagement. Just before your presentation, we had Cesar Pestana from Portugal, who explained us how stakeholders engagement helped the Portuguese energy procurement project to succeed and get even awarded. As he said, communicate, communicate, communicate. And I see that in your thought about connect culture. I believe that this heads up project started not from nothing, right? Probably you have measured the impact that it has in the project.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you typically find that the mobilization, the project startup, is actually a critical piece. This is when you find out where your constraints are. This is where you find out what parts of the organization are not working well together, and that then has knock-on effects for delays. And it can be as simple as if we have to mobilize 2,000 or 3,000 people to site, how are we going to get them all through the training? How are we going to get them to site? How are we going to we've already talked about that they all have beds and we feed them and clothe them, but then there's all that mechanics around that. And typically we overlook those complexities.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John. So what would be your advice as a best practice, how to navigate the pandemic and keep the projects running? Do you have any secret tools or can advise on partnerships?
Well, I think there's a number of things that we've learned. So I hesitate to say, but the pandemic crisis has really created a necessity for management and organizations to resolve some issues that were never there, previously. So remote management and how you engage with people and use digital technology, virtual technology to manage remotely is now becoming much more apparent and much more important. What we know from this is that you can manage complex issues remotely, but it's important to have that personal relationship beforehand. So what we're finding is that best practice is actually that while having design teams and remote management is fine and virtual, we also need some of that human interaction so that people can relate to each other. So we're really finding that having video and being able to see the body language and engage with people visually as well as auditorily, then that's important. The other thing that we've seen is that the local management teams have been able really, and probably not surprisingly, they've been able to step up and fill the gaps. So while we've been able to convert senior leadership into supporting projects remotely, we've also seen local management step up into the roles, which is fantastic. So I think that the pandemic has really given us an opportunity to sort of reshape how we look at the organization and look at the different roles and what they can develop. One important thing that we've been using as a digital technology solution is, well, we have a couple, 2 or 3 partners, that we use. We use ScoutBee as one of our partners to help manage and look at supply chains. This is really important, actually. But mostly, one of the impacts that we've been seeing that COVID has had is around the supply chain and logistics. Another one of our partners, which is Predictive Safety, does a great piece of work around fatigue management. And fatigue management and safety really go hand in hand. And they have a fairly simple act that looks at, cognitive awareness and whether or not the person is really focused. And it actually gives you a different opportunity to have a different type of a discussion with the person, because you're not asking the supervisor to make an assessment of that person's ability to work. It's an empirical sort of measure, and it allows the supervisor to take a different type of approach, really one that hey, listen, we care about you. You didn't have a very good score. I'm going to ask you to maybe take a break, have a nap, in order to manage the fatigue. So there's, especially on 12-hour shifts where you're trying to manage over a 10 or 2-week rotation, especially caused by COVID and travel restrictions and things like that. We're seeing longer shifts and longer rotation periods. Things like that, those are really important.
Thank you very much, John. So that's a great thought. That's a great idea. Just empower people, and they will do the job, and will keep the projects running.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, John. I believe that we will see you again at the panel discussion in about 30 minutes, right?
Yes, I look forward to it.
Okay. Thank you very much, John, for this great presentation about a capital project.